Solomon spent 7 years on it. Stone quarried and finished before it ever reached the site. Cedar shipped down the coast from Lebanon, a small house covered from floor to ceiling in gold. Then, on the day it opened, a cloud filled the rooms, and the priests had to walk out of the building they had just been given. The king who had paid for all of it stood in front of it and said that the highest heaven could not contain the God he had built it for. So what was the house actually for? The project starts as an inheritance. In 2 Samuel, David wants to build a house for God, and the answer he receives turns the word back on him. David will not build a house for God. God will build a house for David, a dynasty, a line of sons. The building itself passes to the next generation. When Solomon opens negotiations in 1 Kings 5, he repeats that reasoning to the king of Tyre. His father was surrounded by war on every side. He himself has quiet borders. So the house can finally go up. And the phrase he uses is precise, in a way that matters for everything that follows. He is not building a house for God. He is building a house for the name of God. That distinction is not a modern softening of the text. It runs through the entire account, and it is the reason the dedication speech does not collapse under its own weight. Almost nothing about the materials was local. Cedar and cypress came from Lebanon, from forests controlled by Hiram, king of Tyre, and the arrangement that brought them south reads like ordinary commerce. Tyrian crews cut and moved the timber. Solomon paid in food, wheat and pressed oil, delivered year after year. The logs traveled by water. The method is worth slowing down for. The timber was bound into rafts and floated along the coast, then broken up at a landing point and taken inland. 1 Kings never names that landing point. It says only that Solomon would choose it. The parallel account in 2 Chronicles names Joppa. That is a real difference between the two versions, rather than a detail one of them forgot. And any reconstruction that shows a specific harbor has already picked a side. A trade that size needed people, and Kings counts them in figures that have to be handled carefully. There is a levy of 30,000 Israelites sent to Lebanon in monthly shifts. 10,000 away, 2 months at home, then back again. That rotation is the text's own arithmetic, and it means the 30,000 were never in Lebanon at the same time. Underneath them, 70,000 men carrying loads, 80,000 cutting stone in the hills, and 3,300 officers over the work. Chronicles assigns the carrying and the cutting to resident foreigners rather than to Israel. And whether any of these figures are administrative records or the round numbers of royal achievement is argued and unresolved. What both accounts agree on is the shape of the thing. Whatever Solomon did personally, he did not cut stone. This was a state operation running on conscripted labor, foreign specialists, and a food economy strong enough to pay Tyre in grain for 2 decades. The stone, unlike the timber, came from somewhere the text never locates, and it arrived in a condition that changed what the building site sounded like. 1 Kings says the stone was finished at the quarry, so that no hammer, axe, or iron tool was heard in the house while it was being built. That is a statement about the site, not about technology. The cutting, dressing, and squaring happened elsewhere, out of earshot, and iron tools did that work. What was excluded was the noise of it from the house itself. Iron Age quarries in the hill country show the technique the verse assumes. Blocks separated along cut channels and dressed close to final shape before being moved, because a mistake is far cheaper at the quarry than on the wall. A much later Jewish tradition, written down in the Talmud centuries afterwards, explains the silence with a creature called the shamir, a worm that could cut stone without tools. It is a memorable story, and it belongs to the history of how this verse was read rather than to 1 Kings. The text offers something plainer and harder to picture. the largest building project in the kingdom, going up in something close to quiet. With every loud decision already made somewhere, the account never shows us. The house those blocks formed was smaller than most images of it. First Kings gives it as 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. Ancient cubits are not a fixed modern unit, and the honest range runs from roughly 45 to 52 centimeters. So the building was somewhere between about 27 and 31 meters end to end, 9 to 10 meters wide, and 13 to 16 meters tall. At a normal walking pace, you cross the entire length in well under a minute. None of that is a failure of ambition. The proportions are doing something other than impressing you with volume. A porch, 20 cubits wide and 10 deep, stood across the front. Behind it, the main hall, the Heck Hall, ran 40 cubits, around 18 to 21 meters. Behind that, the inner sanctuary. Around the outside of the house, on 3 sides, ran chambers stacked in 3 stories, each level wider than the one below, because the wall stepped back as it rose, and the beams rested on the ledge instead of being driven into the sanctuary wall. Light came through windows described with a term read as either recessed frames or narrow slits. The shape is not recoverable. The plan produces a sequence of narrowing permissions. Court, porch, hall, inner room. Each threshold admits fewer people than the one before it. The building is not organized to gather a crowd. It is organized to control approach. One detail refuses to settle, and it changes the entire silhouette. Kings gives the porch no height at all. Chronicles gives it a height of 120 cubits, more than 50 meters, a tower 4 times taller than the house behind it. Some Greek manuscripts and the Syriac read 20 instead. Both readings are ancient. On one, the facade is a modest entrance. On the other, the first thing visible from anywhere in Jerusalem is a shaft of stone standing above everything else in the city. Every picture you have ever seen of this building has already chosen one. Inside, the stone disappeared. Cedar covered the walls from floor to ceiling, and cypress covered the floor, carved with gourds and open flowers, until no stone was visible anywhere in the finished room. Then gold covered the cedar. The account repeats the verb until the repetition becomes the point. Overlaid, overlaid, overlaid. Walls, floor, doors, the cedar altar, the chains across the entrance to the inner room. At the far end stood the debir, and its dimensions break the pattern of everything else. 20 cubits long, 20 wide, 20 high. A cube of roughly 9 to 10 meters aside, lined completely in gold. The house is 30 cubits tall, and the cube is 20, and First Kings never explains what happens to the 10 cubits above it. Some reconstructions raise the inner room on a platform and reach it by steps. Others leave it on the same floor with an unexplained void overhead. The text describes no stairs. Both answers are inferences, and every drawing you have seen has quietly committed to one of them. 2 cherubim of olive wood stood inside that cube. Each was 10 cubits high, with wings 5 cubits long. Placed side by side with their wings extended, they spanned the full 20 cubits from wall to wall, one wingtip against one wall, the other wingtip against the opposite wall, and the 2 inner wings meeting in the middle. The room fits them exactly. Under those wings, the Ark of the Covenant would be set. So the most protected space in the kingdom, gold on every surface, is close to full before anything is placed in it. A cube you could cross in a dozen paces, occupied wall to wall by 2 carved figures, holding a chest that First Kings says contained the 2 stone tablets and nothing else. The bronze was made somewhere else entirely, and by someone else. Solomon brought in a craftsman from Tyre, also called Hiram, not the king, the son of a Tyrian father and an Israelite mother. The casting was done down in the Jordan plain, in clay ground, well away from the building site. Where the copper itself came from, the text does not say. 2 pillars came out of that work, and they became the public face of the project. Each shaft stood 18 cubits, around 8 to 9 meters, with a bronze capital of 5 cubits above it, worked with lattice, chains, and rows of pomegranates. They were given names, Jachin and Boaz, which is not how anyone treats a structural column. Whether they stood free in front of the porch or were built into it is still an open question of the plan. Then the sea. A cast bronze basin 10 cubits across, 5 deep, and 30 around, roughly 4.5 to 5 meters wide, holding, in the version in Kings, 2,000 baths of water. Ancient liquid measures are contested as well, but the working range puts that somewhere near 40,000 liters. Chronicles says 3,000 baths. The 2 figures cannot be describing the same vessel. It rested on 12 bronze oxen, 3 facing each point of the compass, and it existed for washing. That is worth holding on to. The most expensive single object in the courtyard was a water tank, because everything that happened in that courtyard made hands, arms, and animals dirty. Those round proportions, 10 across, 30 around, are where a popular claim gets built, that the Bible here teaches pi as 3. Ancient building measurements are routinely rounded. The curve of the rim is never described, and the verse is reporting the size of a washing basin rather than proposing a constant. All of that work, forest, coast, quarry, foundry, is compressed in Kings into 2 dates. The foundation was laid in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, in the month of Ziv. The house was finished in the 11th year, in the month of Bul. 1 Kings sums the work up as 7 years, and says almost nothing about the order of the work in between. The chapter is organized by rooms, not by seasons. One interruption breaks the construction account, and it changes the register completely. While the walls are going up, a word comes to Solomon about the building itself. If he walks in the statutes, God will keep the promise made to David and will live among the people of Israel and not abandon them. The condition is attached before the roof is on. The house guarantees nothing. Then a figure most retellings leave out. The temple took 7 years. Solomon's own palace complex took 13. Kings reports both numbers without comment, and what a reader should make of the comparison has been argued ever since. When the dedication finally comes, it comes in the 7th month, the month of Ethanim. 1 Kings does not say which year, and the account has already moved past the palace, so anyone who fixes it in the 11th year is guessing. Solomon assembles the elders and the heads of the tribes, and the ark is carried up from the city of David, a short climb at the end of a journey that had taken generations. The priests bring it into the inner room and set it beneath the wings of the cherubim, and the poles used to carry it are left in place. 1 Kings pauses to note what was inside it. The 2 stone tablets from Horeb, nothing else. Then the priests come out, and the house fills with cloud. The text is specific about the effect. They could not stand to do their work because the glory of the God of Israel had filled the building. It had been finished, furnished, and paid for, and at the moment it began to function, the men who ran it had to get out. Solomon's speech starts where you would expect. This is the fulfillment of what was promised to David. The house has been built for the name of the God of Israel. A place has been made for the ark. And then, standing in front of the altar with the cloud still inside the building, he says the thing the entire project has been walking toward. Will God really live on the earth? The heavens and the highest heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built. The move is downward, and it is deliberate. Not the temple first, the sky. The largest space the ancient imagination had available is named and dismissed as too small, and only then does the building come up, as the smaller absurdity. The king, who has just spent 7 years and an enormous share of a kingdom's revenue on this house, stands inside it on its first working day and says it does not contain what it was built for. What he asks for, instead, is exact. He asks that God's eyes be open toward this house, night and day, toward the place of which God said his name would be there. Not that God would live in it, that God would watch it. The prayer that follows is built entirely on that distinction. 7 situations, one after another. A dispute that needs an oath, defeat in battle, drought, famine, and disease. The foreigner who comes from far away because he has heard the name, an army sent out to fight, and finally exile, the people carried off to an enemy's land, praying back toward their country, their city, and this house. In every case, the request is identical. Hear from heaven where you live. Hear and forgive and act. Every petition in that prayer points at the building and then goes straight past it. The day ends in numbers nobody can model. 22,000 cattle, 120,000 sheep, a festival running 2 full weeks. 1 Kings reports them as the scale of the occasion. Nothing outside the text confirms them, and no one has produced a workable account of how that many animals could be handled in that space. Everything described so far comes from a document. It is worth being exact about what survives outside it. Nothing of Solomon's temple has been excavated. That is a limitation of the site, rather than a verdict on the building. The platform in Jerusalem, where the text puts it, is one of the most contested religious locations in the world and has never been available for proper stratigraphic excavation. It was rebuilt, destroyed, leveled, and monumentalized repeatedly across the following millennia, and the layers that would hold a 10th century building aren't reachable. What we do have is the vocabulary. At Tel Moza, about 7 kilometers from Jerusalem, a Judahite temple of the right general period has been excavated. An east-west axis, a courtyard, an entrance unit, an altar, cult objects, and a long history of use. It shows that monumental temples existed in Judah in that era. It is not a copy of the building in 1 Kings, and it does not verify one. Further north, temples at Tel Tayanat and Ain Dara follow the same architectural grammar: porch, long room, inner sanctuary, that 1 Kings 6 describes. Together, those sites do one thing well. They make the building described in Kings regionally normal, a plan an architect in that world would have recognized, built with techniques attested in that world. They cannot put it in Jerusalem, and no honest reconstruction should ask them to. The account has one more thing to say about the building's future, and it is not what a dedication chapter usually contains. After both buildings are finished, God answers the prayer. The request is granted, the house is consecrated, the name is placed there, and God's eyes and heart are promised to it. Then the same condition that appeared while the walls were still rising is attached again. And this time, the text follows it all the way to the end. If the people turn away and serve other gods, they will be pulled off the land, and this house will become a heap of stones that travelers stop beside and ask about. The building predicts its own ruin in the chapter that dedicates it. Centuries later, the ruin came, and nothing identifiable has come back out of the ground since, which is why the sentence at the dedication reads differently once you have watched the whole thing go up. It is not modesty tacked onto the end of a construction project. It is the reason the project could survive being destroyed. Gold over cedar, cedar over stone. A 9-meter cube, filled wall to wall by 2 carved figures. Every layer of that building is an act of enclosure, and the man who commissioned all of it stood in front of it on its first day and said that what it was made for had never been inside. What he asked for was something a building can actually do, not hold God, Give people somewhere to face when they most need to be heard.